Based on the New Testament, there's very little chance that Jesus would walk into your church and say, "Yep, it's a church." More likely, he would say, "Why do you bring me here?" This is part 2 of 2 on the question of what church would look like if imagined through the lens of Jesus or the lens of the New Testament. My name's Torsten Moritz. I'm a biblical scholar. The most foundational starting point for this is something that I rarely, if ever, hear expressed anywhere. It is this, biblically speaking. Church is supposed to be a model humanity in the sense that people are supposed to look at it and say, if I follow their God, this is what I'm going to get. Can you imagine the tragedy if people actually did that? They actually walked into our churches and said, okay, so this is what I get. This is what it's truly like to be human. You have to hope that they won't. The moment you turn anything into an institution means the few humans manage the many humans, you've lost your notion of church. There's no point keeping going from there. What if we didn't talk so much about good news, but actually were good news, and ideally not in some remote building with a parking lot, but in the world where people actually live? What if we stopped the preaching and started communing? What if we understood that Jesus has no patience for religious rituals? We just need to read the New Testament. What if we ditched the rituals and ended up telling stories to each other, meaningful stories about actual life? What if that ends up being more spiritual and more true to our narrative being than the rituals managed by the few? There's a reason Jesus had no interest in preaching, in the few talking to the many and the many going, okay. Some will tell me in the comments that Jesus spoke to people. Yes, but at no point ever in the New Testament does that constitute preaching in any formal kind of religious context. As for the institutions that did that kind of preaching, the synagogue, Jesus had no patience for it. Read the Gospels. Elevate relational skills. Let people actually talk to each other. If your formal context gets in the way of that, it's the formal context that needs to go. Avoid church buildings. They're a giant waste of money and resources. Unless you're homeless, you already have your church building. Share your lives, joys, experiences, grieving, and so on with each other in community. Allow the kids to be a part of that. Don't give them special programming. Unless you want to model a kind of humanity to them that really isn't worth having. Speaking of programming, instead of running things from the front, encourage mutual learning. And by the way, every single point I make in this video can easily be demonstrated for early Christianity. Mutual learning. Value gifted teachers, but do not let them run the show. Stop doing stuff from a stage. You don't need a stage. Stages divide the few from the many. There's not a chance of community occurring. If I go to the theater, I don't go there for community. I go for a performance. Why in the world do churches emulate that instead of what we could be doing? If you need a stage, you're not church. If you run programs, forget transformation. You're not going to get both. Transformation requires mutual interaction, not just humans and God, but humans and humans. And in any case, there's no biblical reason to assume that the ones on the stage are somehow God's way of talking to the many. Never forget that good news means being sacrificial. That means to each other and to those out there. You know what? There shouldn't be an out there. We should be out there. If you criticize charity for maybe political reasons or other, you have no good news. Why should people listen to you? Institutionalizing community and therefore ending up managing people top down is a sure sign of having no vision of true church. Empires large and small are for the insecure. If that is your vision of church, close it and repent. Stop postponing God's values to the afterlife. Heaven is not a post-mortem condition. If you actually read the New Testament, heaven is a condition that should exist here. If you're a mechanic and a Christian, repair poor people's cars. Get together as a community and repair that broken trailer in the park over there. If instead your church reserves 5% for that kind of ministry, take your hat and leave. It's the 95% that's the problem. Remember the giant waste of money I mentioned? Good news is about lifestyle and it's about others and relationships. Read the Gospels. Cherish the minor characters in life like Jesus did, not those who want thrones on either side of Jesus like the disciples did. Well, he cherished them anyway, which is amazing, really, because it's the minor characters, the small people, who got stuff done. If you want to be taught divine values through the Gospels, who's going to teach you? The 12 disciples or the minor characters? The 12 disciples you can put at the top of your cathedral if you want, but they're not going to teach you much. Certainly not by comparison. Scrap the silly church membership classes for new members. Jesus didn't care, neither should you. If you like doctrine and faith statements because you don't want to have to think about stuff, and certainly not communally, instead you want to tie it up in a neat package, it's not church, forget it. True churches are decentralized. They're out there in real places. If you can attend this thing, it's not a church. But if people feel truly invited into their lives, I don't mean the greeters at the door. I mean good for them, but that's not what we're talking about here. Truly being invited. If you experience that, then you've experienced church. Stop asking for people's money to keep the weekly show going. Use it out there for the sake of the world. Co-create experiences and content. Work together. Ditch the managed humanity model. That's an institution. We have plenty of those already. Way too many. That's not what humanity is about. Humanity is about people, not institutions. Why in the world would you model institutions? Model humanity. Be gift-driven in your community. Associate leadership with gifts. If people are gifted in some ways, they should be taking leading roles in that area, but not in others. I can lead in certain areas. I can certainly not lead in others. And that is true of pretty much anyone who will ever be part of your church. It is far better to have, let's say, 9 people than 15. You know why? In our experience in this culture, in the West, the people who finally start coming out of their shell after a couple of weeks or a couple of months or so, once you hit 15, 16 people, they are going to go right back in there. And guess what happens next? You become an institution, a managed humanity. Don't let it get to that. Split. And when you split, make sure you now have 2 communities, that you don't have leadership over both of them. They're separate communities. Do stuff together, have fun together, learn from each other, but do not start another institution by having oversight. You've just lost what you had gained. You know what a good-sized church is? The kind where you can go shopping together, cook a meal together, and clean up together, and everyone gets involved. That's church. You can't do that? You're probably too big. Do not turn your communal times into low-level therapy sessions. Those Bible study tools that people are trying to sell online, forget it. They're not only incompetent, they keep you from doing stuff that is actually worthwhile. True community. If you have a larger community now, don't turn it into small groups where the large community is reflected yet again in how things are done. You've gained nothing. Instead, start fresh and always build from the bottom up, but not too far up. Finally, don't be afraid. Make mistakes. Laugh about it together. Then move on. Do it a little bit better next time. Life's too short for well-oiled Christian fluff, and the world is already full of it.